The Secrets of Doctor Who is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, episode number 111.
One day, I shall come back.
That's it. I've been renewed.
Is when a Time Lord's body wears out, he regenerates.
I'm a Time Lord. I'm not a human being. I walk in eternity.
Bravehearty.
Change, my dear, and it seems not a moment too soon.
Unlimited rice pudding.
Position healers. Wearing a bit thin. Fantastic.
I am Scottish. I can complain about things.
Ta-da! Ooh. Should be fine.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series, Doctor Who. And today we're back to discussing a story from the First Doctor called The Sensorites. I almost said the First Doctor story, but that's not right. It's a story from the First Doctor called The Sensorites. And joining me today on the panel, as always, are Jimmy Aiken. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
And Father Corey Stika. Hi, Father Corey.
How's it going, Dom?
Good. So, as we always do, I want to remind you to like The Secrets of Doctor Who on Facebook. We have a Facebook page there. Just look for it there. Retweet us on Twitter when you find us at SQPN. You can leave us comments, subscribe if you're not yet subscribed in iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, your favorite podcast app, or on YouTube, where you should hit the bell to get notifications of new episodes. And remember to share the podcast with your friends to help us grow the community of listeners and reach more Doctor Who fans, because we know that if you listen to this podcast, you are a Doctor Who fan, and we want to share the wealth with so many more people. So today we're talking about this, as I said, the First Doctor story called The Sensorites, and it's an interesting little play, a 6-episode story here where things move quite a bit, I have to say. So this is from the first season of the First Doctor. It was broadcast from between June and August of 1964. We are still with Susan, Ian, and Barbara on the TARDIS with the Doctor, and we're picking up from the previous episodes as things are kind of continuing along as they're trying to get home. And it starts with them recounting their adventures so far and how they've changed. And the Doctor even mentions he had an encounter with Henry VIII.
That's one of three interesting references to the pre-Ian and Barbara era in this. There's actually been a debate among fans about, just how long did that period before Ian and Barbara go on, where just the Doctor and Susan were traveling. And based on evidence in this episode, we learned that it went on for a period of years.
Yeah.
Apparently, in this story, I should say, not the first episode of it, but in this story, we learned that it went on for years that the Doctor and Susan were traveling alone. And we learn of 3 prior adventures. One is with Henry VIII, where Henry VIII apparently sent the Doctor to the Tower of London, which was his plan because that's where the TARDIS was. He also apparently had a 19th century adventure with Beau Brummel,
right?
Who said he looked better in a cape. And Susan mentions they had an adventure on the planet Esto, which had telepathic plants. And if you stood between them, it would interrupt the flow of their telepathy.
Right. Yeah, it's very interesting. It's sort of a big expansion of the Doctor Who universe in this episode. Yeah, the mythology. We get that right here, fairly quickly throughout this. And it feels like they wanted to sort of expand the background for us as a.
Well, if you took
still have no clue about Gallifrey and
right.
the Time Lords yet.
Right. Yeah, if you took the first few serials just as they would have been, broadcast back then, the only thing is that they were exiled from their home planet, but know nothing about what they did after that. Did they go from that home planet right to Earth? Did they bounce around a little bit? And so, and I wonder if that was a conscious decision on the part of the producers to say, we need to make it sound like the Doctor did more than just go from home planet to Earth.
Right. So what we get now is they encounter this derelict spaceship, full of recently dead people. They hadn't moved for 24 hours before that, based on their the self-winding watches as the Doctor explains to us how a self-winding watch works. That was
interestingly that they're in the far future and yet they still have mechanical watches.
yes, that's right. And it turns out that they had been sedated or made to look as if dead by this species called the Sensorites. And when we're first introduced to the concept of the Sensorites, they're sort of the scary unknown, these creatures. And in fact, when we first see them on screen, kind of coming up into the portal, the window out into space on the bridge of the ship, they were kind of creepy. That would have been kind of creepy for me as a kid if I'd seen that. So it was very interesting, and we kind of, not a whole lot happens in this first episode of the sixth, except we kind of get introduced to the idea of that there's some sort of conflict between humans of that era and the Sensorites.
So we're in the 28th century. They established that.
Right.
And we have these three human astronauts, 2 men and a woman, on this spaceship that is in the solar system of a planet called the Sense Sphere, which is where the Sensorites are from. And if you haven't seen it, to give you an idea of what the Sensorites look like, they're kind of like gray aliens. They have big, long heads. They're bald for the most part on top. They have kind of pointed ears. They have darkish eyes, not giant eyes, but darkish eyes. And you don't really see their mouths. It's not clear whether it's exactly what's going on with their mouths is not clear, because they have these upswept beards growing out of the bottom of their chins, and instead of hanging down like our beards, their beards like sweep up. And they wear these jumpsuits. Oh, and they have weird round feet. Their feet are totally round.
Yes.
Not like like a flat plate. Is the bottom of their foot's like a flat plate.
Right.
And so they're wearing these body stockings, and they also have something that looks kind of like a stethoscope that hangs from their shoulder. And if they put the round part of the stethoscope on their forehead, they can transmit their thoughts. So with this visual imagery of like the bald head and the round thing on a cord, they seem kind of reminiscent of the Ood.
Yes.
And according to Stephen or Russell T. Davies, they were an influence on the Ood, and he established on screen, on computer screens in the show, that the Sense Sphere is in the same solar system as the Ood sphere. So they apparently are related races.
Very interesting.
And like the Oods, they are actually not aggressive at all. They're not aggressive. They are actually timid, but they're not as servile as the Oods are.
Right. Yeah. The telepathic device. To me, it looks exactly like an Apple Watch charger cord. To use a modern reference that some may know. Yeah, and in fact, that's a very interesting aspect of it is the similarity of them. One of the things that sets them apart, though, is that they're also easily startled by loud noise and not bright light, but darkness. So even like dim light that we would consider dim, they, for whatever reason, their eyes cannot perceive anything, and it's very dark for them.
Alarming.
It's alarming, and they're easily startled. They also have an ability to, as we kind of mentioned, suppress the brain function of humans. And the one of the guys on board the ship, they introduced a permanent state of fear, which I thought was fascinating. This idea that the crewman John, who just could not, he was just permanently afraid, and it made him, they said, act violent, although we never actually saw him act violently.
But he was a kind of creepy zombie guy who was constantly paranoid. Yeah.
There was a great moment where they point out that his hair had turned white, apparently from stress, because no man of any youth would actually have hair that white, and the doctor took exception to this slur against people who have white hair.
I think they said he was like 30 or something like that, but his hair is all white.
Yeah. There's a couple of fun moments in this where they're on board and they're trying to get the TARDIS key lock is stolen. The Sensorites
by this
take it right out of the TARDIS. Not the key. And it's very interesting because I don't think I've ever seen any other creature tamper so fundamentally with the TARDIS as we do here.
No, normally it's invulnerable, especially for people who don't have similar technology. And it's interesting they then don't go into the TARDIS because it's now become dangerous to do so. Since the door lock is gone, it could apparently collapse the internal dimensions if they just open that door.
Right. And it creates the classic TARDIS separation plot device where they have to figure out a way to get back into the TARDIS and get home. And this is funny moment, just sort of classic old TV. There's this cabinet labeled water, and when Barbara says, "Where's the water?" and one of the crewmen says, "Over there, on that side." And so she and Susan walk right by the cabinet, clearly labeled water, and go through the door to the place where no one is supposed to go. And I just,
yep.
oh, you mean down through the door and down the hall? I just thought that was pretty funny. Then we find out that Susan is telepathic, and she receives telepathic messages from the Sensorites.
And this is the first time we've had Time Lord telepathy explored in the show. We didn't know that Time Lords were telepathic before, and even Susan is not that telepathic. This is a new ability for her that the Doctor has not realized she's had personally previously. But she begins to be able to communicate in more than other people can with the Sensorites. And so Time Lords, we learn, can have a kind of limited telepathy. Yep. They're not like betazoids that are just reading everybody all the time.
Right. And it's funny, there's a funny moment where the Doctor reveals to Ian that he's telepathic too and can sometimes read Ian's mind, which is Ian gets a little disturbed with it first, although that seems to pass. And then the Sensorites, they demand that Susan go with them to the sense sphere, or they'll kill everyone else. And so the Doctor and Ian accompany them to the surface, and Barbara stays behind. And Barbara is not in this story for several episodes. Barbara gets a vacation.
She literally, the actress got a vacation for 5 episodes, and then she comes back in the 6th episode.
Right. And that's how they, like we've talked about before, that's how they, on this shooting schedule where constantly episodes, this is how they would manage to give the actress some time off.
It's not like soap operas today where they say the character of so-and-so is played by so-and-so.
Yeah, right, exactly. The Doctor does not like Susan going with the Sensorites. In fact, she disobeys him, which is a very interesting moment where she stands up to her grandfather and says, no.
This is a nice character moment. And she does eventually capitulate and does what he says. But she's like, "You're treating me like a child. Stop it." And then we get a nice conversation between Ian and Barbara about the fact Susan is growing up. And then later, Barbara comes to Susan and is saying, even though your grandfather, doesn't appreciate how grown up you are, he is trying to do the right thing here. And so she tries to help Susan see the Doctor's perspective. And so it's very nice. You have this typical scene that, would happen in any species as young people are transitioning to being mature adults. And you have Susan, Barbara, playing this kind of intermediary role as a mature woman. She's mediating between the grandfatherly perspective and the granddaughterly perspective.
And it really is a development. We talk a lot about development of character, but it really is a development of the character of Susan, where she's not just the yes, grandfather, yes, grandfather, yes, grandfather.
And screechy at the scary things.
And actually, if they had continued to explore things about Susan like they do in this story, Carol Ann Ford may have stayed with the series, because she didn't like the unchallenging acting role of just being a kid who screeches. She wanted to be the more mature, and she thought the telepathy they gave her made her character much more interesting. And so if they'd continued to explore her maturation and her telepathy, she might have stayed with the series longer.
I wonder if that is as much an issue of TV then versus TV now, because we're used to character development. We recently recorded an episode talking about season 11 of New Who, and that was one of the things we talked about was character development. That's something we expect in TV today. I wonder if that wasn't quite as much an issue in the 60s.
It's interesting question. I'm
there
not
was
sure.
much more of a status quo, hit the reset button
right
in a lot of TV.
Right. I wondered, and maybe this, based on what you just said, Jimmy, this is not true, but I wondered if they were actually laying the groundwork here for Susan eventually separating from the Doctor and going off on her own, with leaving her behind.
There may have, that's tickling a memory. There may have actually been a proposal to have a spinoff series with Susan.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, wow.
That would have been.
But I may be misremembering that.
Okay.
It certainly never happened.
Right.
Not until Big Finish.
Yeah.
Right. So now we get this difference. We're into the second episode, and we get this different perspective, or actually in the third episode, this different perspective on the Sensorites, where now it seems that they don't actually want to be at war with humans. They want peace, but they're afraid, and so
they want to be left alone.
Right.
Yeah, and some humans who were here previously have apparently done wrong by the Sensorites, which is why they're so suspicious of humans.
Right.
And they say people always say they want peace, but then they destroy. And the Doctor, meanwhile, has uncovered evidence that possibly John, who's a mineralogist, John the astronaut, and possibly members of a previous expedition have discovered something very valuable mineralogically on the Sense Sphere, namely molybdenum, which they may want to exploit. And so the Sensorites have good reason to be mistrustful of humans.
Right. Yes. Apparently in the 20th century, molybdenum is the thing to have on the.
Well, and it does have, actually, they taught. I was surprised at how accurate all the science is.
Yeah.
They really fulfilled their remit in this series of episodes in explaining the science to kids. But molybdenum, it does have a very high melting point compared to iron, and it does make really good steel, and it is a strategic asset. Actually, a lot of people aren't aware of this, but there was kind of a minor battle-ish encounter during World War II here in the United States, where we had a molybdenum mine. I think it was in Colorado, somewhere like that, and the Nazis had agents who were like supposed to take out this molybdenum mine and to deprive us of this strategic asset, and it didn't work.
Oh, that would be a very interesting movie. I'll pass it along to any scriptwriters I know. So one of the things that the Doctor says actually in the beginning of this is, I forgot to mention this. He says he wants to leave as soon as they encounter like the dead people on the spaceship. They don't remember. Says, I've learned not to meddle in other people's affairs years ago, which caused me to stop and laugh out loud because that's pretty much Doctor Who in a nutshell, is meddling in other people's affairs.
Well, that's again going to season 11 with Jodie Whittaker. How many times did she say that? Don't meddle in other people's affairs, and then she goes and meddles in people's affairs. Exactly.
So we have this. They're now down on the surface. It's Ian and Susan and the Doctor. We find out that this. Go ahead.
And they have all these new Sense Sphere sets with lots of curves and stuff. So the architecture looks very different than anything we're used to.
Right. And the Sensorites have a caste system, and they're identified not by name but by role, and but verbally identified and visually identified. Really set off by certain series of sashes or collars or armbands, and that plays a role in this, which is sort of like the Sensorites all look the same to us, and we only really able to distinguish the one from another by the particular armband or sash that they're wearing.
And even they apparently, unless they're really close up, can't tell one from another. They recognize each other that way too. I like how the first elder has crossed baldricks, these two crossed sashes. He looks like he needs to strap on bells and start doing a Morris dance.
Actually, it was funny. What struck me was, the first elder was the cross sashes. The second elder was just the one sash across.
Like it actually.
That's what I was going to say. It reminds me because when priests in the traditional rite, the extraordinary form, the 1962 missal, whatever you want to call it, when they would do their stoles, they don't drape them down like you see priests do today. They would cross them. It was bishops that would have them struck. So the first elder was like a priest with his cross stoles. The second elder was like the deacon with his cross or his sash across his body, stole across his body.
And the city administrator is like the Anglican minister with just the collar.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, so speaking of the city administrator, so we have this very interesting complex plot show up where the first elder is the leader of the people, the second elder is like the vice president of the world,
also like a counselor.
Yes,
the first elder.
Yep.
Right, and then we have the city administrator who's say like the mayor of the capital city. So we have these different political positions, and while the first elder and the second elder are amenable to dealing with the aliens, the city administrator is immediately suspicious, immediately wants to cast them out. And it's all about, it's not that he's, it's all about just his suspicions of aliens.
He's not evil, and even the first and second elder need to have the humans prove their trustworthiness to them based on their prior experience. This is one of the things that I like most about this series. I really like this series because of the complex portrait it gives us of both alien and human culture. The humans are not universally good in this. We later meet members of the previous expedition who are there to exploit the Sensorite planet.
Right.
They are villains, but other humans are good. And you get the same thing on the Sensorite side, where you have Sensorites who are reasonable and eventually realize the trustworthiness of the Doctor and companions, like the first elder and the second elder. But then you have Sensorites who are just dead set against human beings, like the city administrator. So you have this complex society on both sides, which makes the plot much more interesting to me than both sides or even one side is all good or all bad. Also, I like the fact that the conflict, as Susan points out, is that suspicion is making them enemies.
Right.
It's not they're evil. They're not like Daleks. And unlike Daleks, they don't all have the same ideology. They have disagreements. Right. And that makes them much more interesting and makes this, in principle, a much more interesting story to me than a standard monsters equals bad or humanity equals bad episode.
Right. There's an interesting aspect to this where the city administrator has a plan to kill the Doctor and companions, but also eventually that progresses to a coup. At first, it's not about a coup. At first, it's just about he wants to save his people, but then he decides that the only way to save his people is to get rid of the first elder and the second elder, and then he can have the power to be in charge of everything, so there's this complex political situation among the Sensorites.
And it develops step by step. And so this is what, in a six-parter, this is what keeps it from being boring, is that we have this complex political plot unfolding, that not just running through corridors. Right,
exactly. And then we have the dramatic tension at this point is Ian drinks the wrong water. So apparently there's two kinds of water. There's crystal water and aqueduct water. And Ian drinks the aqueduct water against the advice of the first elder.
So, in other words, it's the difference of drinking Perrier versus the grocery store generic bottled water.
Yes.
See, Doctor Who has always been political.
and Perrier is poison, or Fiji water, or coconut water, or whatever.
Premium. Yeah.
Okay, that's what it is. So, the Sensorites apparently just accept the fact that some amount of people die of a disease while related to the aqueduct water.
But it's been more since the humans showed up.
Right. And then the Doctor is convinced that it's not just, random. It's not just, a weird disease, that they're being poisoned. He finally figures out that there's a, what was it? There's the belladonna, I guess it is the poison that he finds.
Deadly nightshade.
Deadly nightshade. Which is kind of funny. Atropine poison is what is deadly nightshade, which is funny because that's a
real thing, and they accurately describe the symptoms of it.
But that's an earth plant, right? I mean, obviously,
well, the compound that makes deadly nightshade poisonous is that's just a chemical, so they could have that on any planet, but. He does later in the aqueduct underworks. He finds a deadly nightshade plant,
right?
And he doesn't make the connection. Oh, this must have been brought here by the Earth expedition that also must be hiding down here.
Right. Yeah, I kind of wish he'd made that connection because at the time I just thought it was oh, now you're just being silly, anachronistic, and not explaining, and kind of making the mistake of an Earth plant being on an alien planet. But
Right.
in fact, connect the dots. There was put there by this
and
crashed
the funny part is
expedition.
they could make it as simple as, oh, this is just like Nightshade on Earth. This must be where the poison is coming from.
Yeah. This
Right.
is Space Nightshade.
Yes. Apparently, the Sensorites also have nice cursive handwriting in English. If you remember the list of the water districts as they were testing them. So the doctor
that was the TARDIS translating for us.
So let's do that. Yes.
Yeah.
So the doctor traces the poison to this one particular district in the Sensorite planet, I guess, or the city.
And the city. And apparently they've been moving we don't know that it's the Earth expedition guys that are doing it, but apparently they've been shifting it around, which is why the Sensorites haven't figured out, because it's not always the same district being poisoned.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't seem like a very effective plot, because what are they trying to accomplish, the humans? Are they trying to kill all the Sensorites? Because it doesn't seem to be like they're poisoning enough of the water to kill them all off. They're just really being like,
well, it's
evil,
it's
annoying.
Kind of the almost guerrilla warfare type technique of you be enough of a thorn in their side until they finally just give up.
But give up
but
to what
they
effect?
Haven't made any demands.
Right. Like,
Well,
are they trying to get them to leave their own planet? I mean, it's a sort of a strange. It doesn't bear too much.
To be fair, jumping to the end, the humans that are doing this are delusional.
Well, yes, their
minds are gone, and they think they're in like this perpetual war with the Sensorites, and they're doing it as part of that war.
That's true. The Sensorites don't even know that they're at war with these humans.
Don't even know we're under attack.
Yeah, whereas the humans think they are. Yeah, that it's an active war. So you're right. They're right. That's worth pointing out. So the city administrator doesn't believe that there's poison in the water. He thinks it's the doctor trying to trick them all. And
right, he thinks that Ian pretended to be ill and then pretended to be cured from the doctor's cure.
Right. And it's the sign of that irrational hatred is irrational and causes you to come to irrational conclusions, which is a nice point to be making here.
Well, it is from our perspective, because we know that the doctor Ian was not pretending, and Ian really was deathly ill. But it's actually shows some sophistication to have the Sensorite asking the question, what else could explain this if I'm right that they're up to no good?
That's true.
And thinking, oh, well, this could all just be a fake. They're conning us.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It also shows the risk of you get too caught up in a perspective, caught up in a conclusion,
right?
And you can fit everything to that conclusion, even when you're making bad leaps of logic, as the city administrator shortly will do.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah. So he says at one point he intercepts the antidote and destroys it and says, well, if this was a fake, then Ian will get better and just get up and walk around, because he can't continue to pretend to be dying. If he dies, well, so what?
Yeah.
And so it's Ian's in danger here, so they have to find the cause, and then eventually they get a second dosage of the antidote, and Ian's all better.
Susan goes to the lab and gets another dose. I like, though, before then, one line that struck me as particularly comical is when Ian. They've also brought down John, the astronaut who has the brain problem.
Right.
And so the first elder agrees, before Ian falls sick, he agrees to have his scientists heal John. And so he tells them, conduct him to one of the restrooms.
Yeah,
it's like, really? That's where you're going to fix his brain, in the restroom?
Yes, that would be the difference in British versus American terminology.
Well, I had to laugh too when Ian did fall sick. The doctor asked the first elder, "How long does this illness take?" 3 days, and the doctor's like, 3 days, as long as that? I've got kind of like that. I've got all the time in the world to solve this.
Yes. At one point, the doctor keeps shouting at the Sensorites, and which is because he's outraged at their at the things that they're doing, and they keep cringing.
Great embarrassment.
Yeah. Well, they keep cringing because they take shouting as if it's a physical attack. So we have the doctor goes into the aqueducts to investigate this poison. He's attacked. The Sensorites won't go in there, right? The Sensorites won't go in because it's dark and because there's loud noises of something down there, and so the doctor, tut,
and they believe they're monsters,
right?
Yep.
And so the doctor is attacked down there.
They do hint there's something down there because they talk about how they've been trying to light up those waterways, those aqueducts, and it keeps failing.
Right. Something keeps taking the bulbs out.
Yeah. So this is an area where the writing falls down a little bit. It's like, what? They don't have flashlights and earplugs?
Well, apparently they do have flashlights because they give her ones.
Well, I was going to say, because then they turn around and they give them to the humans. So what makes us so more qualified to go down there than you guys?
Right. So another interesting part. So the second elder is killed by the city administrator in the process of trying to get him to do their bidding and trick the first elder.
Yeah. It's an accident. They don't deliberately kill him, but he does die.
Right. But now he has to be replaced, and the doctor unwittingly recommends the city administrator to be second elder, which was a nice touch there.
This is a great moment where the companions, are making a deduction that, like, hey, he'll like us if we support his candidacy now, so we can get him on our side this way, when just the opposite is the case.
Right. They're doing themselves damage in this case. Right.
I also really liked how by this point, the city administrator has already taken to impersonating the second elder. And as soon as it's the lady astronaut, I forget her name.
Carol.
But, Carol, that's right. So Carol has been talking to him and noting that, I can't even tell you apart without your distinctive, clothing fashion accessories indicating your status. And the city administrator is like, ooh, I never thought of that before. And it's like, we have Chekhov's sash on the table now.
Right. Those sashes become very important. So the new second elder arranges for the doctor and Ian, who are going back into the aqueducts, to be given useless weapons. They have these little hand racket weapons or dreamcatcher weapons that are apparently very handy, but the doctor
that will paralyze you. Oh, and so the doctor here says,
yep,
I've never liked weapons of any kind, but these are handy little things. And so I prefer this attitude to more the anti-weapon screeds that we get in more recent seasons. This is much more reasonable.
Right. Yes. I mean, the doctor doesn't like weapons, but when it's necessary. And we see the third doctor and some of the later doctors, they end up having to take them up. So at one point, Carol is kidnapped by the second elder's henchman, and John, who he's the astronaut who had his brain was messed with.
And they're engaged by them.
And they were engaged, right? And he comes to her rescue, which was a nice a touch there. At one point, someone says, I forget exactly the context. I have it written down here. You don't trust the ground you walk on until you test. Oh, this was Susan and the doctor. You don't trust the ground you walk on until you test it. So why trust your people implicitly? No, it's Susan to the first elder. And I'm like, I trust the ground implicitly. I don't test it before I walk on it everywhere. It was a very
unless it's something unique or different that you're not sure. Like say ice this time of year for those of us in northern climes.
Yes,
or maybe if your feet are like little perfectly round circles that you need to test the ground with.
Right, but it's just the idea. Like, well, no, that's the point. Like, she actually basically proves this point, which is I trust everything the people I'm surrounded with implicitly. Yeah. So it's kind of funny.
There's a nice, that's a kind of a flaw, but there's a nice bit of reasoning where, so at one point before this city administrator has become the new second elder, he's brought in a guy to accuse the doctor, who's like one of his totems, factotums. And he's been told to say it was the doctor who killed the original second elder.
Right. That he saw it.
And that he saw it. And he saw him take something out of his pocket. And the doctor at this point has just come back from the aqueduct underworks, and his coat has been torn to shreds by whatever attacked him. And so the first elder has just brought him a cloak, a cape to wear. Yep. And he makes the remark about Beau Brummel always did like me in a cape, which is like as far as there are probably earlier name drops the Doctor has done, but this is one of the first.
He was a 17th century like fashion plate, like
fashionista.
Yeah.
And I thought he was 19th century, but I could be mistaken.
I could be wrong.
But in any event, so Ian steps up and says, "So you saw the Doctor kill the second Elder, and you saw him take this thing out of his pocket. Was it his coat pocket?" And he's like standing between the factotum and the Doctor, so he can't see him. And he says, "Yes, it was his. He ends up being exposed because the first Elder has just given him this new cape,
right?
And it is inconsistent with the factotum's story,
right?
Well, I love they the have Doctor's... this moment. It's like in the book. It's like in Daniel 13 with the story of Susanna, where you have the elders tricked by their own words.
Oh yeah. Well, I love the Doctor's pose at that point too. He takes the cloak and kind of wraps it around him and kind of gets a nice pose going there as he's standing there, showing that this guy's a fool.
Right. Yeah. Oh, he took it out of his coat. Well, his coat was gone at that moment. Oh well, coat or cloak. I mean, I can't tell the difference between those. And the first Elder is the one who says, "I just gave him that cloak. He didn't have even a cloak at that point," and proves the guy was lying, who is taken off to prison, and then the second Elder busts him out again. So all to the bad. But so it turns out that the Sensorites as a people are not the bad guys. The poisoning was being done by these humans who were shot down by the Sensorites and were living in the tunnels, as seen by their wild hair and extensive beards. That they must be wild.
Extensive fake beards.
They were apparently made insane by the Sensorite telepathy and thought that they were at war, as Father Corey pointed out. And so things are wrapped up quite nicely at the end. Susan is sad that she wants to lift telepathy because apparently it was the sense sphere that was giving her the telepathy. And this is one of the things that is at this moment where I felt like they're setting up Susan's departure, where she says she just wants to feel like she belongs somewhere. Like she kind of says she's kind of getting tired of the traveling. So if that's what kind of made me think that she was preparing her departure. So,
well, it wasn't that. I mean, isn't that pretty much considered the reason why they ended up on Earth? Is she wanted to settle down somewhere? And
she wanted to stay on Earth at least.
That's what I mean, though. But it was stay there and be just a normal school kid and all that.
Right. That's true. And then as we end the episode, we're setting up the next series, the next set of episodes, and the next story. We have this very strange shift to me that seems strange, where Ian says something that seems somewhat innocuous, and the Doctor like flies off the handle at him. And like issues this threat to cast Ian off of the TARDIS at the next stop. It was a very strange moment, and I know that segues are not always easy. I get this.
Well, it was weird because literally the conversation before they walk in was between the Doctor and Susan talking about this old ship of mine seems to be an aimless thing, and then Ian says basically the same thing.
Right.
But maybe it was because his was more of an insult of, at least they know where you're talking about the human ship that's flying off. At least they know where they're going.
Right.
So maybe it was the fact that it was more of an insult or the Doctor took it as more of an insult versus, well, the ship is just an aimless old ship.
Right. Maybe a little case of I can criticize my father, but you cannot.
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, so that's how it ends up setting up the next story, which is apparently the Reign of Terror, which is one that it doesn't exist. It's one of the lost episodes, right?
Yes.
Which will take place in.
I think we have parts of it because I think I've seen because the Doctor plays two roles in that. I mean, this is another one like The Enemy of the World, where the Doctor gets to play both the hero and a villain.
Okay.
So I think there's maybe some episodes that I don't remember.
Yeah, the TARDIS Wiki is showing it as partially missing.
Okay. So there are parts of it available out there to see. So maybe there's a way we can still cover this for you folks and still do this one justice. Yep. That would be great. So any final thoughts, any notes that I've missed that you guys wanted to bring out from the Sensorites, Jimmy?
I do have
Father Corey, you go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Couple of things. I liked at the very beginning where they actually walked right from the TARDIS console room into the ship. There was no, you actually watched them. I think that's probably the first time that they actually show them walking from one to the other.
Right.
Instead of there being, a cut scene, between.
It's also one of maybe the only time it happens in Classic Who.
Right. I got a kick out of the fact the astronauts had absolutely no qualms about space travel. They just, you're from the 21st century. Well, I mean, the 20th century. Yeah, that works. Okay. Ian has the perfect definition of companion separation. Well, I don't like this splitting up. It always leads to trouble. That's it right there.
Yeah.
And then kind of one last thing. Susan was talking to the first elder describing their home planet, Gallifrey. And she says,
we don't know it's Gallifrey.
Yeah, that's why I say Gallifrey, but the home planet. At night, the sky is a burnt orange and the leaves on the tree are bright silver. Well, that should sound familiar to us because just last week we did Gridlock.
Yeah.
And that's exactly how the 10th Doctor described Gallifrey.
Yeah.
With a little more explanation, but that's basically how he described it as well.
That was a callback all the way to here that established the basic color scheme of Gallifrey.
Yep. Very good. Very nice. Very nice. That's the sort of thing I like with a show that's been on for 50 plus years, to be able to call all the way back to the beginning to elements. It's really nice. Jimmy, do you have some stuff?
I was going to mention the same thing about Gallifrey. Also, Susan, the Doctor, he's a little ambiguous with her about the telepathy. Even though it is going to diminish because they're leaving the sense sphere, he says they can still kind of go on to explore it or cultivate it and see what happens with it in the future.
Right. All right. So let's finish up that discussion. So before we finish, I want to take a moment, as we often do, to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create Secrets of Doctor Who. Today, we wanted to thank Catherine N., Kim L., Laura M., Matthew B., Sailing L. Through their generous donations at sqpn.com/give, they make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows at sqpn.com. And you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. Like I said, that's it from us. What did you think of this first Doctor story, The Sensorites, which you can watch online in various places? But I watched it at BritBox.com, which is a streaming pay service. That's one place you can watch it.
You can also get that through Amazon.com.
That's right. That's right. My wife likes British crime mysteries, so BritBox makes sense for us. So let us know what you think by visiting sqpn.com or the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page, and leave us some feedback or send us an email to drwho@sqpn.com. You can find links to all our personal social media and websites on our show notes on sqpn.com. We'll be back next time when I just forgot. What are we discussing next time?
The Highlanders.
The Highlanders, which is a second Doctor story where the Doctor meets Jamie, one of the most popular companions of all time. And this is a unique episode because it's not available as video. It's only
but it is available on audio with linking narration, and it's also been novelized. So you can check it out, and we'll definitely be telling you about it.
Yeah, you can find it online. Audible has it and some other places. So that'll be next time. Until then, Father Corey Stika, thank you for joining me in sharing the Secrets of Doctor Who.
Always glad to be here, and thank you, Dom.
And Jimmy Aiken, thank you as well.
Thanks, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest. And remember, the Doctor doesn't make threats, but he makes promises, and he always keeps his promise.
Right. This is going to be fun.